Okay there, everybody. Hello, I'm glad that you are all with me. Sorry for that brief hiccup there for a moment if you started on our Fox 43 page. I was accidentally streaming, excuse me, my throat's deciding it's not going to work today also. But I was accidentally streaming through an incorrect page and I had to kind of fix it here for you guys. But we are in good working order on this Sunday, last day of November, December. It's coming up. It is right around the corner. And oh boy, do we have some stuff to talk about now. Of course, we've got some wintry conditions expected for the first week of December. For folks who remember or saw our winter weather outlook maybe 2.5 weeks ago now, we said December would get a pretty cold and fast start with an active pattern and below average temperatures. And the active pattern is already shaping up, and yes, the cold is going to show up as well. So, with that said, we'll just get right to it because obviously Tuesday is going to be the point of interest for, I'm assuming anyway, presumably most folks given what's ahead. After a quiet Monday, chilly for folks heading back to work, perhaps some students are heading back to school. I know mine's not going back until Tuesday, but obviously that might be questionable. At least a delay is possible, but there could also be some closures depending upon how things ultimately work out, of course, and where you live, because, well, we are looking at the first plowable snow of the season, shovelable for at least most of the area. Some of the spots where it might not show up so much, those aren't going to come as a shock, I'm sure, unfortunately, but we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about, although it's a low possibility, how there might be just the slightest bit of hope in those spots, because I always do like to have, well, at least a little bit of an optimistic outlook. Or maybe you don't want it to snow, then maybe I would be putting a damper on whatever you want to happen. Either way, though, we'll get a close look at what's expected. We do have snow totals. It's been a wonky one to track for sure. I mean, I've seen the models in particular be stubborn and just kind of lock on what they want to do. I am surprised that they waited, but I think in the 18Z runs, they finally started to show some promising shifts. So we felt a little more comfortable putting out what we are expecting. Oh, yes, everybody jumping on already here. Sorry, I've got things pulled up how I usually do. Good evening, Keith. Good evening, Adam. Good evening, Chad. Thank you for joining. And yes, we do have the snow, of course, in the forecast, and we'll get to it. But yes, you'll notice this special word here right next to snow called mix. It does happen, and it is expected to happen. I mean, it is early in the season. The ocean's still pretty warm. The track, it has shifted. So it has shifted closer to the coast with the rain-snow line converging right over our area. That can't be ignored. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you guys, I've been forecasting here for, it would be, I believe, 14 years in January. Like January 2nd, I think it is my 14-year anniversary. I can remember very few times where the mixing was not underestimated. So in my experience, I have learned you always have to bank for that line to be a little higher than you're anticipating, and maybe even the arrival time of some of that mixing with sleet, freezing rain, whatever it may be, to expect it maybe even a little earlier than what's being modeled as well. So with that said, I'm going to put the weather impact 7-day forecast right out there for you. Of course, Tuesday is a weather impact alert day, but unlike some of the more nuisance type things we put out these weather impact alerts for, like, dense fog and, wind advisories and whatnot, this is a higher end one because this will be much more disruptive, especially because a lot of this is going to happen during the morning commute, which, of course, busy travel time, a lot more folks on the roads, first snow of the season, and we know what an inch of snow can do when it's the first inch of snow for the season. So, yes, it's going to be one of those high impact times for sure. Let's see. Ooh, we've got some comments coming on already. JJ, you're saying 2 to 5. You're just giving away my forecast, man. Come on. But yes, that's what it is. But we'll talk about it a little more and the reasoning and why we came to that decision, because I believe that that's also very important. We don't just guess or flip a coin like some people who don't understand the science behind it and what goes into it often like to joke, because, you know, we joke and we make fun when there's something we can't wrap our head around or understand. But I'm going to do that for you so that you guys know. And then, Tom, you said if we just didn't have gravity. Gravity? Yeah, I know, right? Silly gravity. John, you say good evening. I say good evening to you. Jonathan, I know. Push it. Well, actually, Jonathan, and I think I said this on my Friday post, pushing it too far south can be a double-edged sword, because then we have to worry about the cutoff. Maybe for you over in Lancaster County, because I know you live in Lancaster County, you don't care about friends in, say, Mifflin or Juniata counties to the far northwest in the area that we covered, but just throwing that out there. So, yeah. It is definitely going to be a cold one, even once we get past Tuesday's cold and snow, of course. Oops, I am clicking ahead. Whoopsies. Let me back that up here. Wednesday, my pointer, that's what I meant to click, and I saw an arrow and I totally clicked the wrong one. My apologies there, out of the corner of my eye. That's what happens when I try to multitask sometimes. Wednesday, though, Thursday, you'll notice it'll be cold, and it does look like quite the impressive little cold blurb that's going to quickly settle in for Friday, ahead of yet another system. A weak-looking one that looks like it might take a very similar path. Obviously, this is still how many days away now? 6 days away, so we see changes. If you see any really big snowfall totals out there that just seem crazy, like more than 6 or 8 inches, I haven't really looked yet because I've been so focused on what's happening Tuesday. If anything looks high to you, disregard it, unfollow that page because they're not giving you genuine, good, useful information, or hit the little X so that Facebook stops showing you or suggesting pages that do that. Got to cater the algorithm. I mean, if you want it, fine. But if you want your algorithm catered to, you know, people who don't just put out the highest totals for attention, make sure that you're keeping it to forecasters that you trust, guys. Is this a Chinese storm? I don't know what you mean by that, Keith. You're going to have to explain that one to me. Like, did it originate? Like, did the energy originate from China that the storm's dipping into? Is that what you mean by that? And then, hi Greg, thanks for joining from Lancaster. And then yes, cold outside, guys, but we've got plenty of cold coming our way in this first week of December, obviously. It's going to really show up for sure with that cold. Now, let's take a look at what's happening right now. This is the system that crossed through earlier today. Gave us a little, maybe, coating of snow on, say, your chairs or your patio. Few spots before ultimately it mixed with some rain, and that was that through the rest of the day. Very light to nothing. I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning to my child saying, "Oh, it's snowing, it's snowing." Oh, you say the name of the one storm, Chen-Chu. Oh, I don't know what. I don't follow the naming scheme that the Weather Channel does. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. I have no idea. I don't do that. And most of the for what it's worth, most of the meteorology community outside of the Weather Channel doesn't recognize that either. But let's take a look here. This is basically the system, part of the system anyway. This is the energy. Usually these systems have at least 2 components to them if it's not a clipper system that's diving down from Canada, from say north central Canada anyway. This one actually originated a little bit more in southwestern Canada and the northwestern portion of the U.S., so like Seattle, Vancouver area, before it started to dive down to the south. So, with that in mind, this is the energy associated with it, bringing some spotty snow showers over the Denver area. Ultimately, we've got this stalled front here, and that's energy is going to meet up with an area of low pressure that's going to ride along here. It's not going to be a very strong storm, and that never really seemed to be the indication that you get that really nice, good energy transfer, intense coastal system. That was never looking like this setup. So, I mean, I've said it before that I just roll my eyes when I see places putting out, and this is really any kind of outlet. It can be, you know, forecasters, on-air forecasters. I've seen so many people guilty of this, and I dislike it for many reasons. And then just weather enthusiast pages put out totals. I mean, and it shows no value, especially because they'll usually just post one model with one run of totals and then not show you the opposite, which could be way lower or nothing. And to me, that's just disingenuous, gets people all hyped up and worried about snow for no reason. Especially when, you know, you really can't put out reliable totals until 48 to 24 or 48 to 36 hours, before a storm, for that reason, because so much can still change in the 72 to 36 hour window. I know some do it and some can do it well, but even still, there can be a lot of changes that happen even for those more seasoned and experienced folks. And in our experience, especially because we get hyper local over a 10 county area, we think, you know, since we're not doing regional areas like the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, like say, you know, the Weather Channel or AccuWeather, just to throw a few of those out there, since we are much more hyper local to this 10 county area you see here in South Central Pennsylvania, we wait until 36 to 48 hours depending upon confidence. We're sort of in the middle of there at this point right now. Probably closer to 36 though than to 48 hours from the first flakes that fall. Harrisburg 100, you're asking if the kids will be off from school. That's never my call to make, but I can absolutely see there being bare minimum delays. And I think there will be many districts, especially north of the rain-snow line, that will probably make the call to do just that. Of course, like I said, I don't make that call for them, so anybody who's watching now, make sure that you're checking with your school district. They see all of the information that forecasters across the area put out and make their decision based on that. But I think this is going to, you know, be a snow day / virtual day, or even a delay depending upon where you live in our area. So I would say bank on that. My little one, she actually was so upset. Funny side story. I told her she might have some snow Tuesday morning and might not have school because of it, and she got so sad because she's getting new glasses tomorrow and she wants everybody to see her new glasses right away, and I just laughed. I was like, oh, you're still so young. One day you'll appreciate the snow day. So with that said, we'll move on. We'll move on to Futurecast. We'll start this one Sunday at 8 o'clock, which is basically now, and we'll put this into play. And very quiet through Monday. We'll actually have sunshine. You'll notice high clouds filtering in through the day. They'll continue to thicken through the night. Again, Monday's a quiet day for the kids that are heading back to school. And of course, for folks who are heading back to work after a long holiday weekend. Or maybe a shorter holiday weekend. Whatever it is for you. Either way, quiet Monday. Chilly though. Temperatures running roughly 5 to 8 degrees below averages with highs around 40 degrees. And then the high clouds will continue to thicken through the night. Now, the first flakes likely don't get into our area until after 3 o'clock in the morning, and not for all of the area. And you'll see that this is going to be a recurring theme. A lot of times when we're talking overnight, overnight into the morning snow, some people will wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and say, oh, the forecast is wrong, there's no snow, it's a bust, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember the last time snow was called for in this area by everybody, and nothing happened. But what does happen is that people wake up, see that the snow didn't get to them yet, and don't think the snow is coming, and in a couple hours it does. So this is going to be one of those mornings where if you live a little farther east and you get up at, say, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you might still be waiting. So as I put this into motion, you'll see by 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, we start filling in here with some snow. We'll also notice too here, and this is because it's a weak storm, that there will be some heftier bouts. There will be some drier pockets from time to time. This will be a wet snow, the kind that's a little heavier to shovel, but also good for the children to make snowballs, snowmen, even do their sledding in. So that is going to be, you know, what we experience. But once it starts to fall, I mean, it'll be cold enough to stick. It won't have any problem doing that because we're going into this cold. It's nighttime when this event starts. And, you know, we'll keep the cold locked in place at least until after 7. But that said, I'm going to call your attention right here to this pink line. This is your rain snow line. A little bit of sleet could be mixing in just to the north of this pink line because, like I said, this can often be underestimated. If it snows heavy enough, that is a good way to overcome it and keep the temperatures in the atmosphere cold enough throughout. But with a weak system, you don't get those constant heavy snow totals, or snow rates, excuse me. That can be a little harder to do. So it's very possible that this line is already coming in for parts of York and Lancaster by 7 a.m. And yes, I know, friends in York and Lancaster, PA, you're probably rolling your eyes because you're like, because you know this happens all the time with these systems. Because that rain snow line, if it's not along the I-95 corridor and it's farther west, you know it's over our area, and indications are very strong from the beginning that we could end up with the rain snow line over our area. The models were split until today between the rain snow line just south of our area or into our area. And guess what? They're converging somewhere in the middle. Shocking, I know. That's usually what happens though when we see these models eventually come together into better agreement here. So not only do we have a fairly weaker system, but we're not going to have the intensity rates, I think, to really keep the mixing at bay. I think that's going to be very difficult to do. I think I-95 corridor is going to be plain rain. You might get some mixing with wet flakes in, say, Chester, some of the northeast, northwestern suburbs of Philadelphia, but I think it's going to be pretty hard to get significant accumulating snow long enough anyway. And then look at that rain line just continues to move in. In particular, York and Lancaster counties, those usual spots. That's where, you bet, our lowest totals are going to be. But you'll notice over that time, Harrisburg, Carlisle, Chambersburg, Lebanon, snowing pretty heftily there, even still seeing a decent amount of snow in, say, Lewistown. And then, of course, in the western portion of the state, it's already showing signs of breaking apart. We're going to get that back edge. This storm's really not going to intensify until it's past Delmarva and more up towards the northeast. So that's when it's really going to put down the total. So I think we really start to get into our higher end totals greater than 5 inches. I think it's going to be Lehigh Valley, Poconos-ish, and points to the north, and our snowfall totals will reflect that. I think it's very likely our area just misses out because of this. The science, I see what the totals say, but a lot of the science just doesn't support what the totals put out sometimes. That's why you can't just read a model and put it out and then say, okay, this is what's happening. I mean, you can, but ooh, you're brave if that's the case. Braver than I am. Well, some places are, and it works for them. But anyway, well, it works for getting attention. It doesn't work as far as verifying goes. Let me be a little clearer there. Jeffrey, oh, yes, I know. I have some comments to catch up on here, guys. Let me just finish up here, and then I will play catch up while I go over another model, and then some of the snow totals that we've had to look at before ultimately getting to where we got for our totals. But the answer is 2 to 5 coding to 2. And if you saw my post from this morning, I did say I'd have a very hard time going any higher than that. And we ended up living up to that. When our team talked about what we wanted to do through the afternoon and the early evening. because the 12Z models, the afternoon runs didn't converge as much as we wanted. We actually chose to defer until the 18Z model runs or the early evening model runs because it was a little, we weren't feeling the most confident in what we had at first. And then we ended up tweaking it, and now we feel better about it. Anyway, though, notice this rain snow line. I mean, it's getting into much of Lancaster County by 11 o'clock. And at this point, too, even if you do have, say, 3 inches of snow on the ground, which is very possible in northern Lancaster County, rain, sleet, I mean, that's compacting it. It's turning it to slush. It's just slop on the roads. Even into northern York County, the mixing line very well could make it to Gettysburg. Does it make it to Harrisburg? Does it make it to Lebanon? I mean, I can't entirely rule it out, even though this particular model has them in that location, in the snow side of things. There are other models that don't. And, you know, I think everybody has favorite models. Everybody knows the Euro has the reputation of being the better. The Euro AI model is getting extra special fun attention this year, too. Which I have to say, in the end, ended up being what we ended up leaning closest to. Or at least one of the models. Not because we chose to, but just when we put out what we put out and we looked, I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll have to see, though. Anyways, I've said this before, though. The GFS usually is terrible at first. Anything past 4 days, even 3 days sometimes with the GFS can be complete garbage. But then in the medium range, sometimes it locks on. And then it actually outperforms the others as it gets much closer to the end. Where conversely, the Euro can start off really well, but then never really quite lock on and can sometimes actually get outperformed by the GFS or even a different model. Also, the Canadian model, worth watching. Because when there's colder air or even an Arctic air mass in place, that's when it performs best. I know it usually has a reputation for being worse than the GFS and even the NAM. I've actually noticed, especially through the summer and the fall, I found that it's usually been my tiebreaker, and that it's actually at times, especially in the long range, outperformed both the European model and the American model. Just throwing that out there. So you can never, be sold and stuck to only one model. You always have to consider all of the possibilities, and that's what we do as forecasters. It's the fun part of it, though, the challenge of figuring it all out. And then this is all gone by it starts wrapping up at 11 in our western spots. It's gone by 2 o'clock in our eastern spots. Okay, maybe some snow showers, like right here until about 3, apparently, in Lancaster County. But you get the point here. All right. I am going to catch up on some comments here. Let's see. Good sledding snow? Yes. Wet snow for sure. Enola, Wurtsville, son is excited to sled? Yeah, I think you're guaranteed at least a couple inches to sled in. Wet snow, heavy wet snow too, so should be good, at least for making snowmen, probably for sledding too if you've got some good hills. Might not be as slippery as the powdery stuff, but I think it'll be good for sure. Did you mention Lancaster City with snow? Oh, we'll get there, but yes, you will start off as snow, but unfortunately you are going to probably expect the lower end of the totals here because that dreaded mixing line, like I talked about, Greg, it always has a way of getting into York and Lancaster counties in these situations, and we need to keep in account the ocean's still pretty warm. So a track that's closer to the coast, which is where everything has trended, even the Euro trended closer to the coast today. It was very slow, but it's been doing it. I mean, that just brings in that warmer air, and that just cannot be ignored for snow lovers, unfortunately. But I think you'll at least get a little bit. Not as much as everywhere else. So when you see the highest contour, snow total contour that I have, unfortunately, you're not going to be in it, and that's going to be why. Irving, I'm making you cold. Oh, well, I've got news for you with December. It's going to make you colder. And then, oh, here we go. Jeff, you said we get those rain snow line a lot, which makes it hard for you. Yeah, I know. And for you in Northeast Lancaster County, I mean, yeah, that's going to get you. Where particular in Lancaster, in Northeast Lancaster, are you? You can give me general area. You don't need to give me your house address, I promise. Keith, you say 3 to 5 inches in Pittsburgh. I would say that's probably about right. Yeah, based on what that futurecast just showed, I would say that's a pretty reasonable bet, depending upon where exactly you live along the Pittsburgh area. I would say southwest of Pittsburgh is probably your best shot for getting those, you know, closer to 5 inches, but I would say at least 3 inches is right on based on what I saw. Although I will admit, it really didn't look too much to west. I did look a little farther to the east, just out of curiosity, because that's where my family's from, and I know my mom's going to be asking me. She lives in Delaware County, right by Philly, so right by the airport, actually. She lives like 10 minutes from the airport, so yeah, I know people. I know she's going to ask, and I know other people at home are going to want to know too. Now, this is another model. Okay, Denver. Okay. I think reasonably, yes. I think you're going to be in a tricky place, but I think you'll probably be closer to 1 to 2 inches in our coding to 2-inch range once you see it. This is our HRRR model. This will have some spotty snow showers to start right after 3 o'clock. Notice how it fills in though by 6. Again, folks, if you wake up in Lancaster County and it's 5 o'clock, even maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's not snowing yet, it doesn't mean it's not coming. It just means it's arriving the latest for you, because this will come in from west to east, and you're not going to have as much time. Time is always key here with the rain snow line. Before that mixing line gets in, time might not be fully on your side here, and here you go. This is why we have a coding to 2-inch range, and this is why it's always so tricky to pin it. But I mean, Gettysburg to York, Lancaster, you know, that's usually the sweet spot. This time around, with the way the storm's kind of curving, it might end up from Gettysburg to Harrisburg to Lebanon at worst case scenario. I'm pointing out worst case scenario. Best case scenario is that it's York to Lancaster and stays, I'm trying to think of a town. Oh, shoot. Off the top of my head, in southeastern Adams County. But worst comes to worst, it barely makes it in there and should stay just east of Gettysburg. But here you go. And you see this dreaded rain snow line, it's right here. I mean, again, if it's snowing hard enough, it is possible that you get just a little bit of sleet instead. But ultimately, this is always so tricky here. Again, that's why we have a coding to 2-inch range, because I mean, if you live in far southeastern Lancaster County, I promise, keep your expectations bare minimum. The farther northwest you live, you can raise those expectations a little. Even more northwest, that's where you want to be to really get your best shot at our higher amounts here out of all of this. But there could even be a cutoff. The models have been indicating as this thing tightens up, maybe there's a cutoff that starts to develop from, say, State College down to Altoona before everything is said and done here. But a lot of the state will at least get a little bit of light snow before all is said and done. Now here you go. We're getting heavier snow out of this particular solution. Although I will say this HRRR model, this one is 48 hours out now. It usually doesn't get those finer details. This is a really great model, but it usually doesn't lock onto those finer details until it's closer. So, I know I showed you the other model first because I want to get your hopes up for this one, because I know that about this model. So, if this rain snow line comes up on this model by this time tomorrow, it would not surprise me in the least. Just want to put that out there. It's possible though, but notice some of this pink here. I mean, it's very possible that this is, again, a little bit of a snow sleet mix, which really does cut into totals regardless. You always have to take a lot off. Ultimately though, it gets that mixing in by the end of the morning and then rain into the afternoon. So again, it's not going to allow for too much. Also notice it had a later start time. So it ends up balancing it out here. So it's definitely, it's going to be a sloppy mess eventually regardless. In fact, near the tail end of this, as it's wrapping up, even some spots farther west might end up getting that little bit of mixing before all is said and done here. Now let's talk snow totals. This model I am starting, I believe it is it's the European model that I'm starting. Now, you'll notice, again, if there's not a lot of snow on the ground by the time you wake up in the morning, expect that. Expect that. This doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean the storm magically dived more enough to the south. It does not mean that. It does not mean this was a miss, because look what happens after that. Now, I will give you one quick thing here. This is the afternoon run of the European model, not the more recent run, which upped totals right around here where I'm highlighting to more of like a 3 to 5. Disclaimer here, but it still does have the mixing. So I think York Lancaster getting close to 34 inches is still going to be a really tough ask here. I think it really is going to be a very tough ask, especially because the storm track did shift. And if the storm track shifted, it's just, if your track is more inland but your snow totals are still there, why? Something isn't adding up here. Maybe it's trying to account for the heavy snow totals that I just showed you at the HRRR, where maybe you get heavy enough rates. I've seen some signs that that might be possible, but I'm just not sure it's the most likely of the scenarios at this point in the game. So keep that in mind. This is our American model, the GFS model. It's one of the more gracious with snow totals. Kind of blows up and gives a lot of places a lot. 5 inches isn't out of the question in a lot of spots. 6 inches could be a tough ask. If it's not at some of our higher elevation spots, it could be a tough ask, especially if you end up with the mixing. If there is any sleet and any rain, your hopes and dreams of high end, We had a hard time going more than 5 inches, especially with how weak this system was looking. The northwestern cutoff on the Euro, and it was showing up in some of the other high resolution models too. It's just one of those things that give you pause. And now I'm going to show you, which one is this? The graph model. That was actually the first FutureCast model I showed you. This is something that's actually interesting to watch. Does the heavier amounts that will likely be in the Lehigh Valley and also the Poconos, something that might stretch just far enough into our area? I'm not entirely sold on that yet, because the storm just doesn't intensify until it's more near Long Island and whatnot. So, those heavy rates could be a tough sell, especially when you've got that rain-snow line here. These totals don't take into account your mixing very well. So, mentally, you can usually chop a little off. Also, 2.5 inches in Lewistown, that back end, I mentioned that briefly, that'll be something to watch. So, could be a very tight gradient. If it happens to narrowly slip into part of our area, could be very narrow. And that's a detail that if we are to put it in, we would have to put it in as that gets closer and see if the models lock in on that feature. And a couple other things that you look for when you're looking for lift on your models to get those heavy snowfall rates. I've only seen some indication of it on the Euro right now. It's called frontogenesis. I'll spare you the details. Anyways, moving on to the next model. This is your HRRR model, the one I showed you. This one looks fairly realistic to me, for sure. It's got that cutoff. Do I still think it's that high and say York and Lancaster? Probably not. You'll see our totals eventually getting there. And then, yes, pretty much more of a widespread blob because, again, the storm likely doesn't intensify soon enough. And this is the final one. This is the NAM model. This has been, this has been just kill everybody's dreams with a very horrible gradient. This pretty much just comes in, quick changeover, and then really tight gradient here between nothing to something. Insane. Wild. Again, I don't know if I exactly agree with this, but it does have the mixing idea here. It is the one, too, by the way, that is the most aggressive with the mixing. And then it's the actually, I think the Canadian model is now the most aggressive with the mixing. And then it's the GFS and then it's the Euro AI, and then it's the Euro. So, with that said, we'll summarize it. We'll put a pretty bow on it. Your most impactful times: Tuesday morning into the early afternoon if you live farther east. The timing, entire timing from first flakes to last flakes. First flakes in our western spots, last flakes in our eastern spots. 3 in the morning Tuesday until 2 o'clock in the evening. Mixing with rain gets in after 7 a.m. in York and Lancaster County, and I'll tell you right now, one of the big questions is going to be how far northwest will it get, like we talked about. You'll need extra time on the roads if you're traveling. If you don't have to, not recommended. Never really is. I know, Jonathan, right? Nam, oof. That's what I think when I see that. It's been very consistent with that too, by the way, which is really like, whoa. All of the models have been very stubborn on their one view on what they think is going to happen, which is kind of crazy. I can't remember the last time I saw something like that. Definitely keeping us on our toes and making it a challenging one for the first one of the season. Anyways, a lot of us, though, regardless, will have to shovel. So this is what we ended up going with here. We think most of the area gets about 2 to 5 inches. However, we do have southeastern York, Lancaster in a coating to 2 inches. And yes, our cutoff here is pretty close to Adams County. Close, but not there yet. Depending on the trends with the storm track and the mixing line, will it get to Gettysburg, Harrisburg, and Lebanon? It's possible. Can't rule it out. Could the rain snow line stay here like we saw in our best case scenarios? Also possible. But with a weaker storm, it's not the most likely. You have to rely on some other factors for that to happen. Will it be enough? We still have a very warm ocean this time of year. We haven't had enough cold shots of air yet to get us in a position where that influence up high in the atmosphere, we don't get that warm wedge of air coming in. So a few things that we have to keep a very close eye on. Can we keep the cold locked in, or will that warm air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere filter in like they so often do? It is something that always has to be considered. And can it snow hard enough to overcome that? A lot of what ifs here. I think, though, this doesn't have the making of a system that's going to put down more than 6 inches in our area. I think it is the least likely possibility here. Could there be isolated spots, especially at our higher elevations, especially, say, north and west of Harrisburg, that can get some 6-inch amounts? Sure, those overachievers always exist. But I think this is a 2 to 5 is generally where we're going to be looking at our higher amounts. I think the Lehigh Valley, the Poconos has the best chance of being like a general 5 to 8, 4 to 8 inches, if you want to say that. I think that's just your best chance. It's possible this could try to sneak in to part of our area, but again, I'm just not so sure I'm sold on that yet. And if so, where would that line up? I think with this, with the mixing line trying to get in, it would have to just be hard the entire time, hefty, and I just don't know if the rates will be able to overcome that. And overcome it, like it'd have to be snowing hard pretty much through the entire duration. A lot to weigh, and this is why, everybody's like, oh, everybody has their different, their different maps and blah, blah. Well, this is why. There's a lot of human things that an individual or individuals as a group look at and put together. So, ooh, excuse me, the hoarseness is coming out. But this is what we think based on all the information that we have. We think this is a good first place to start. And then we'll be able to fine-tune this based on the mixing. As always, the mixing always ends up being everything with these systems. Let me see. Oh man, I gotta catch up here. My apologies, guys. How much snow will Sealands Grove get? Sealands Grove, that could be a wild card. You could be closer to a potential 5 to 8. I would not rule that out in Sealands Grove, actually. It just depends on when the storm actually intensifies. I think that's a very good potential. just to answer Chase's question because I saw that. And yeah, Jonathan, it's very interesting that the Canadian really, I don't know if it got some sort of upgrade. I know the Euro and the GFS has gotten upgrades in recent years. Not so sure that the upgrade for the GFS helped it much. I feel like it was better before the upgrade. Sorry, I noticed an obnoxious piece of hair from when I turned. It was kind of annoying me. Anyway, yeah, Adam, water break. I know, right? Ugh, I need water breaks. This scratch or